One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is Dr. Kiki Baker Barnes. Dr. Barnes is the athletics director at Dillard University. Greetings. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Barnes, I have you on here, because you've accomplished a lot. You're very well decorated, and you look at what you've done, right? You took over there at Dillard just after Hurricane Katrina and had to rebuild the whole athletics department. And of course, you know, athletics is the window to the world, so that was probably very important for Dillard. You were the head women's basketball coach there until 2013. Between there, in 13 and 14, you took over as interim commissioner of the Gulf Coast Athletics Conference. You've been the AD of the year at least 3 times, probably more. You were administrator of the year by the Women Leaders in College Sports a few years ago. And overall, you have 22 years in college athletics, roughly 15 years coaching basketball, and 9 of those years as a head coach, with a couple of years overlapping as the AD and the head coach. So, I mean, your career and your experience, there's a lot there, right?
I will say that God has been good to me.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some talent. There's talent, luck, and you got to be able to do things at a high level in order to be able to do all these things here. So there's all of it, right? And God too, right? All of it's a part of it. So
Absolutely.
I have you on here, though, because, you know, recently you were named, again, the interim commissioner of the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. And I have a question about doing the role of athletics director and the commissioner. I wonder, how do you balance that? I mean, your career, you were balancing being a head coach and the athletics director. Of course, now being the interim commissioner and the athletics director, I imagine your primary focus has to be running the athletics department at Dillard. But how do you balance those 2 roles when you talk about those 2 significant roles in athletics?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, first of all, I'm grateful. Let me say thank you so much for having me on, and I'm proud of the good work that you're doing with Athletic Director, you and your company. It can be difficult, let me be honest, but I have what I like to call my own little method of kind of organizing my life. And I like to call it prioritizing, strategizing, and organizing. Those are like my 3 key points of how I manage multiple roles. I think in my career, you know, sometimes you feel like you're prepared for something, like everything you've done has led up to this particular point. Well, I kind of feel like my experiences over the last 20-something years has prepared me to be able to juggle a lot. I've had to juggle across my entire career. So when I got my first head coaching job in 2000, I was head coach of the women's basketball team, but I was also the head coach of the cheer and dance team.
Wow.
Right. And then when I left there, I went to a junior college for a year. I was in transition, thinking about getting back into school, get my PhD. I was an assistant coach, but I also taught a class. I was a professor, as well as I ran the dorm. So then I, fast forward to Dillard University, where I was here for a year as an assistant coach, right prior to Katrina. Then Katrina hit, and they were looking for someone to come in after the prior athletic director had taken another opportunity. But it was a dual role. I had to be athletic director and head coach. And so I was able to remember, well, I've held multiple roles before. This won't be any different. And so during my first 7 years here as athletic director and coach, I held both of those roles, but also started becoming active in my association. So with NACTA, with Women Leaders, with the NAI, ADA. Those are all associations where I joined committees and participated. And so it's kind of like the juggling is something that I'm used to doing. And so I kind of feel like I was prepared for this moment now, where we are working to strengthen the conference and in transition and looking for our next leader. So you got to prioritize. I think that's very important. You have to determine what is necessary first. So when I took over, it was about a month prior to our conference track meet. And so the first thing that needs to be done is we had to pull off a conference track meet. And there were a lot of other things that were important, but when you looked at the priority, that was most important. So we prioritized getting our conference track meet off, and it went well. Then we strategized on how we were going to do that. I had to get support from some of my current staff, as well as work with the local schools. So in New Orleans, Xavier University and Southern University of New Orleans are members of our conference. So I had to work with my conference members to help pull together a strategy that would help us to work together to make it happen. And so we strategized on who was going to do what, and then made it happen. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
So you mentioned three things. You talked about prioritize, strategize, and I think the last thing you said was organize. I'd like to dive into those three. I imagine your staff knows those because they fell off your tongue real easy, so you probably say them a lot. Tell me how you would define those for people who you lead with and who you work for.
Okay, so prioritizing, I define that as how you determine what gets done first. So when I have opportunity, when I'm sitting with staff and we are talking about our goals or what we want, we have to determine what has to happen first in order to ensure everything else goes. So when I talk about prioritizing, that's what we're talking about first. Then we start talking about strategizing. Strategizing is what actions or steps will you take to determine how you're going to meet the particular goal or objective that you've prioritized. And so people are familiar with strategic planning, goals, objectives, action steps. Again, when we get to the strategy part, it's now here's specifically what we're going to do to meet this priority. And then organizing is what I defined as a specific task that helps me stay in line with whatever strategy we have decided we're going to take. So one of the things an example of organizing, recently, one of the things that was a priority was I had to separate how I communicate with my colleagues as athletic director at Dillard versus how I communicate with my colleagues as the commissioner of the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. That's a priority now. So the strategy was, let's find an email system. We didn't have an email system for the conference, and so I looked into some different systems. Gmail, G Suite system is a very good system. It allows me to set up branded emails for our entire conference, not just for me, but for our conference officers, as well as provide storage and the things that are needed so that all of our communication is centralized. So what I was able to do, I prioritized, number one, conference communications, strategy, we're going to use G Suite. Then I organized the specific things that I was doing. So I was able to set up the account separately. So now there's a commissioner and GCAC account. There's K Barnes at Dillard. And so now what I do is on my computer, I have separate web browsers because G Suite is a cloud-based system. So you can check your email from anywhere as long as you have a browser. I have two separate browsers that are open so that when I need to respond to commissioner work or commissioner questions, then it's coming from that particular email account. And then if it's something that's directed to me as athletic director, then I can respond from that one. And that kind of draws a line of separation, and it helps my colleagues know how we are interacting to make things smooth. Because it can be difficult, especially when we have to vote on things, and it's like, okay, is she being commissioner or is she being athletic director? The last point on organizing, those few little steps have helped me organize and streamline how I communicate with both roles.
I would imagine that there have been or there will be or there are times when the priority for Dillard or the priority for the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference probably come at you at the same time. How do you prioritize priorities, I guess is the question I'm asking.
I mean, I have to do them at the same time. Just to be honest, so like literally today, like I shared with you, I have two browsers open. And so I go back and forth between the browsers. And I'm responding accordingly to whichever call. Today we're having a conversation about a change that's coming up in the NAIA on the commissioner side. So we're moving from 2 divisions in basketball to 1 division, and that's going to change how we move forward with the selection committee and some things like that. So there's an email conversation going on the conference email about that change and whether we want to do that, and what are the good, the positives, the negatives, and whether or not we should move forward with something when we have our conversation at NACTA. And so they're both important, and the technology has allowed me to be able to be effective at both. So I would say that right now, having technology, praise the Lord, is very helpful when right now what's happening at Dillard is really important, as well as what's happening with the conference is really important.
Technology definitely helps with that, but let me go one layer deeper with that. When you open that browser that has the commissioner email in it, there's a level of objectivity that you have to be as a commissioner, the number of schools in the conference, the institutions, right? You know, you got to put the hat on as commissioner, objective hat. When you're looking at that Dillard email, though, what's important to Dillard is that's what needs to happen for us at this university. Going back and forth between what's important to Dillard and the objective stance of what's important to the conference has to be tough. I'd imagine that some of your colleagues on campus there, in terms of getting feedback from them, is probably important to you on the direction. It just seems like a lot to handle.
So one of the things that I think is interesting, and I think I do this well, I'm a big picture person. I understand both. I've already had to do this, where I've had to say, well, this is not necessarily what we would want, but here's what would look best for the conference. And I think what has helped me in this situation is I am the advisor to the presidents. And all of them call me for different things, and they're looking for advice for what should happen for the conference. So when I speak to the presidents, I have to speak in objectivity. And I've been doing that even when I wasn't commissioner and I was in my role as president. I acted as an advisor to the presidents. So I feel like I've had enough experience on being able to maintain objectivity because they depend on my expertise to help move things forward, as well as understanding how to advocate for what Dillard would like. Sometimes I would have to say, this is Dillard's position, and I would have to qualify things I would say. That would be helpful so they'd understand now I'm speaking in what I think is best for us. But if this is what we're going to do as a conference, here is the bigger picture in the conference perspective and what will carry us forward. So I think
you flex those muscles.
Leadership,
you work those muscles out, the objective muscles.
I've had a lot of that. So it's not hard for me. And I love the GCAC, so I've spent all my time has been here. This is where I've had the opportunity to grow my leadership. So I am very invested in the success of our conference. And so while, yes, I am the athletic director at Dillard, I also understand the bigger picture, and what is going to be best for our conference is usually going to be very, very beneficial to us individually.
So I'll ask this last question here relative to the position. How involved are you with finding a permanent commissioner, or is that just on the presidents? Or tell me about that aspect of that role.
So where we are, we recently had a meeting. So I led a meeting with the athletic directors to look at some data. So the NAIA recently did a study where they were looking at what conference operations look like financially, as well as what conference staffing look like. And so we had a discussion about what we feel is going to be the best direction for our conference. And so my job right now is to provide information that will inform the president's next steps. But our presidents, our council of presidents, is going to make the decision on who our next commissioner will be. But again, with input from the body. So again, we've already had one discussion. We've reviewed some data. We've talked about are kind of what we want to see happen. And so my next move is I have to actually prepare kind of like a 1-2 pager, because the presidents are probably not going to have time to read anything more than that. That kinds of give them some bullet points on things to consider as we move forward. But our Council of Presidents will make that decision.
Okay, well, this has been an excellent conversation, and I really appreciate how you broke down the prioritize, strategize, and organize. I think that's really a nugget that somebody listening to this can take from it to understand how to do something at a high level like you've done, to high level jobs. Like, we're not talking about you're the assistant something over here and then the head something over here. Like, you're the AD and the commissioner. Those are two high level jobs, which you have to really don't understand how to do. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
Well, thank you.
That was Dr. Kiki Baker Barnes. She's the athletics director at Dillard University, and she is also the interim commissioner for the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.